We're here today for the ADP meeting, Thursday, September 20th, 2 o'clock. First on the agenda is to welcome you to the Squamish Nation traditional territory. And we'd like to adopt the agenda for today. Motion to adopt the agenda. Sarah, seconded. Kenneth. We had minutes of meeting from August 16th, 2018. Is there any corrections or changes we have to make to those? No corrections. Motion to adopt those. Shan, seconded John. Business arising. The first on the agenda is DP 472, the seniors rental at 38275 3rd Avenue. Presenting for the district is Jesse Fletcher. And the architects are here, landscape architects. Great, thank you. Jesse.
Right on. Thank you. My name is, good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. My name is Jesse Fletcher, planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. Here to briefly introduce an application for a development permit at 38275 3rd Avenue. If approved, it would permit a multi-unit residential development providing 232 units of affordable rental housing for senior citizens. The proposed development is subject to Development Permit Area 7, multifamily residential guidelines. Just bring your attention to the report, subsection, the second B. It looks like I had some bulletin challenges. That outlines the variances that are being requested with this, largely to do with parking. The zoning bylaw requires that they provide 348 stalls. They are proposing to reduce that to 154 stalls inclusive of the visitor parking. And if you go through that, the details of how that works in terms of visitor and residential is outlined. And then they're also seeking a variance to the number of Class A bicycle parking spaces from 2 per dwelling unit to 0.28 per dwelling unit, which would provide 66 Class A bicycle parking stalls as opposed to the 464 that would normally be required by the zoning bylaw. Staff is seeking recommendation from Advisory Design Panel on the proposed development, specifically site plan, architectural design, building materials and exterior finish, and landscape plan. Staff feel that the form and character of the development largely complies with the guidelines as outlined in Appendix A of your report. And I'll hand it over now to the architect, landscape architect, and Laura.
I'm Bryce Rositch, Hemphill Architects, David Stoichel from Connect Landscape Architects, and Laura Mordry from the Squamish Senior Citizens Home Society. Just briefly explain what the background for this.
Yeah, thanks for having us. So the Society's been actively working on this expansion and redevelopment project for 5 years. We've recognized that the seniors population is going to continue to grow along with all the other demographics in town. The current proposal includes 232 units of affordable housing for seniors. And the strength of this proposal is that we actually replace and expand everything all at once. In most redevelopments, you usually tear down a building, build a new one, and then that means that the tenants are displaced. But this project is great because no one is displaced during construction. So our current wait list is sitting at 170 people, and this is growing pretty much on a daily basis. So we anticipate that with this new development, our existing wait list will be cleared up, as well as providing new homes for our 75 tenants that we currently have. With respect to the design of the new building, you've done an amazing job, you and your team. When we look at this, it doesn't look like what you would think of as social housing. It's from the outside, it's quite impressive. One of the things that we like the most about this is that all of the units are 1 bedroom, but the vast majority are 1 bedroom units. So currently our tenants are living at 337 square feet bachelors, the vast majority, and most of them now have almost close to 600 square feet, which we think provides a lot of dignity, so that when you have people over or your grandkids are not sitting in your bedroom. All of the units are fully adaptable, which is great as people try to, age in place. We decided to use the same floor plans as the Kiwanis housing project in Richmond, as they proved to be very popular with the seniors there. Electrical outlets are higher up on the wall, doorknobs or door pulls instead of doorknobs, and shower stalls to reduce falling. So the flow of the building as well was very carefully considered with respect to our senior population and the activities that they like to do. And it promotes more social interaction, so all of our amenity spaces are adjacent to the lobby. Other than that, we think that this is a wonderful design, and we look forward to getting your feedback.
That wasn't a comment from design panel, that was a comment from a client about the wonderful design.
Oh!
So you can take it forward. Thank you very much, Laura. No. Sorry, people. Let's go back here. Okay, and this scroll here down to get to the next one.
The arrows there.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
You can see we're showing two sites here. The new seniors building, it's an H-shaped site. To the left, to the south, is the current seniors housing, and this is a very innovative one. Polygon partnered with the Senior Society to create a new building while residents stay in the current building. And once the new building is finished and residents move in, then the current building will be demolished and the new building will go in place. So it's really quite innovative. This is part of a master plan community that has a CD zoning for it. So it's not a zone with setbacks and heights and so on. So it's a little bit more open for opportunity. You can see to the left of the site is a current seniors building, a 4-story seniors building with a little bit of amenity at grade. And then to the west and to the north are townhouses. There's parking. The site slopes, so by the time you get halfway through the site, you're now up. The grade is up so that it's a story up, and we're roughly at the same grade as the townhouses surrounding us on the other side. It provides an opportunity for us to tuck that parking in, so that parking will actually be underground there. And what's exposed, just the front portions, the two front wings, plus the central amenities for the building. And if you've had a chance to take a look, they really are quite extensive. Social rooms, activity rooms, kitchens, gathering places, food kitchens or opportunities for food bank and sort of things, man's cave,
Men's shed.
men's shed. We said that's not politically correct, and they said no, the people, the residents name it the men's shed, so we're not allowed to change it. But it's that opportunity for workshop style things and so on. We've also designed the building so it's got a very gracious entrance to it. So it's got a strong covered porte cochere. When residents or visitors come, they've got covering for drop off or going into the building at the center of the building. And we think that it'll enhance the experience for the people. Typical floors, you can see it's an H-shaped building. There's a tremendous courtyard on the west side of the building that will be commonly accessible for everybody. Private patios for the first floor units that face onto it, but everybody has access to it. And it's got community gardens, it's got play spaces for grandchildren to come for all sorts of things. And it has a pedestrian connection to the trails that go to the senior center, which is about a block away. Also in here is a guest suite on the second floor, so that if you do have somebody who might be staying overnight, there's a guest suite for them to sit in, to go into. You'll notice the hallways have been designed so that there are windows at the end of the corridors. They're really long corridors, you guys. I mean, we design buildings all the time. These are long corridors. And so what we think is very important is to put windows so that there's always natural light at the end of every corridor. You can see that there are 3 sets of elevators. There are 2 in the, this isn't, well, just in the middle, coming up from the lobby are 2 elevators there. There are 2 on either wing, so that if you're parking in the parkade, it's accessible to them. That also leaves direct access to the courtyard. And it also produces natural light into every one of the floors as you go along. So we've tried to break up some of that, the longer walks. You'll also see that there are common laundry rooms on every floor, 2 sets, and those are at the intersections of the H's. And again, it's meant to give easy access, but also provide an opportunity for people to gather. You know, the whole idea of incidental gathering, where you don't have to go to the end of something and open a door. As you're going past, you'll see people doing their laundry, and it gives a greater chance for socialization. These are the upper 3rd and 4th floors. You can see to the left of the building, to the south, is that existing building that I was talking about. We're about the same length as that building. And then to the west and the north are the townhouses. Those are 2-story townhouses with backyards that are roughly at the same grade as our first floor. This shows some of the grade changing. The top one is through the seniors building to the south of us, and the other ones are showing that our grades are roughly adjacent at the same elevation as the grades of the townhouses adjacent. David, we're going to talk about some landscape architecture, and then we'll come back to some massing and shadow and so on.
Nice. Yeah, we really tried in this one to try and fit in, I think, as much as possible to, I think, the Squamish character, and really bring a lot of rich materials and detail to the project. So there was a lot of kind of interest in having fairly detailed programming for the project, and we wanted to really reflect that in a way that we created also just a very kind of fitting landscape as far as bringing a lot of native and near native plant materials, fitting in really with that kind of low maintenance kind of character, providing a lot of color, a lot of evergreen, a lot of seasonal change to things, so that the landscape in a lot of ways really reflects a lot of visual interest. Overall, I mean, the site really is very interesting for us. It's got a lot of different components to deal with. There's the edge conditions all around and how they interface with the surrounding buildings and context. There's the kind of grand front entry where we, have all the drop-off and the real street frontage, and then this amazing big courtyard that has a lot of different things going on, a lot of social space, but also a bit of a connection to the neighborhood as well. One of the key things about the courtyard, besides the programming as far as trying to provide a bit of a walking loop for everybody, providing really well-used community garden spaces, which are on the current site and really well-used, and there's a demand for those, so we've really expanded upon that and kind of tried to create a much more durable version of that. There's seating nodes. There's also this really interesting gazebo that is on the existing site right now. It's a very much part of the community came together to build this gazebo, and we're relocating it onto the site and giving it a really nice context that also relates to some children's play that for visitors or even the public, people will have access to come and give some life to the courtyard, and it'll be very interesting and kind of dynamic, socially dynamic, and inviting for all the seniors to kind of be a bit more a part of the community as well. Again, the rest of the programming, we've got a lot of kind of attention to try and create a nice loop, create a lot of nice little places for people to sit and chat, create some really dynamic social spaces and really opportunities for open space or some smaller spaces, patios for people to do a lot of programming events. And the community garden is such a big piece of when we've kind of done a fair amount of research into similar facilities, what really has worked well on other community gardens, kind of create a really kind of durable solution. And so the durability in the material kind of aspects of the courtyard is really strong.
Then back, you've seen some in 2 dimensions. These are 3-dimensional shadowing diagrams. We are shadowing the townhouses, more so the ones on the north, because we have a wing that parallels them. The ones to the west, there aren't as many townhouses that are affected by it, and certainly the courtyard is a benefit to them. And these are showing you just at different times of day and different times of the year when the shadowing occurs.
Should mention too that on the kind of bottom left, there's a right-of-way corridor that goes between the existing seniors building and this new building that goes past that into the community and then also connects into here. So it's all an accessible route that gets you into the courtyard but also beyond. So it's a nice important connection for people that live here as well.
And the materials, we have a color materials board here, hardy siding, asphalt shingles. We're using, we have to be conservative about the cost of the building, but we're trying to provide as much richness to it, which includes blue lamp featured columns, the large entry port, two-story porte cochere, and other elements to the building to really enhance it and make it feel, as Laura says, it's not a low-income building, but a handsome building. So, Mr. Chair, that ends our presentation.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to just sort of pass that palette board around as we questions? I can start with questions and then we'll do comments after the round. Can you talk, I saw there's some connection to Eagle Wind Boulevard or the Seniors Activity Center that's there. Is there, how is that secured?
Exactly. So if we look at the plan, you can see really there's an existing connection, and we've really worked hard on the grades to maintain that connection so that people getting up and into the seniors community center is really facilitated from both the courtyard and from the right away along the edge. So
There's currently a public right-of-way between the two buildings, two seniors buildings to the left-hand side.
Okay. Is it, you're proposing a paved path to get out to Eagle
Yes.
Wind Boulevard there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and continuing with connectivity, can I get into the lobby and then get into the back courtyard through, can you explain how I get there?
Yes, you'd have to go up one level.
Yeah, I saw that because it's
level
up
one.
parking.
And then you go to either of the two wings, and there are doors on either side by the elevator, those two elevator lobbies that take you out to the courtyard.
Okay, okay. And any, besides the relocated canopy or relocated gazebo, is there more covered space in that courtyard?
There's a central stair core that discussion about putting a bit of canopy over that, but mostly it's been left open.
Okay. And what happens to that, you said you're expanding the existing garden because it's well used. What happens in the winter? Is there any flexibility of that, of moving those planters? What do they do with those in the now?
We're going to put cross-country skiing in the wintertime.
They're far too heavy to move, really.
Yeah.
So, and they're built, right now, they're built in a very sort of permanent way, instead of being kind of timber planters that might have to be replaced after a while. The building might have unit blocks so that
Yeah.
they are permanent. Really, we've got enough open space here so that if that particular area wasn't used specifically, there's a lot of other open space that can still be used in the winter.
Okay. Just going into parking, can you talk about, maybe this comes from experience of the one you modeled in Richmond or something, there's quite a variance of parking required, or you're asking for. It's a serious reduction of stalls, and I get it, maybe that's from the Richmond one? Or can you
It's
talk-
a Richmond experience as well as the local experience, the number of people who really truly have vehicles and will need parking. So it's a real balance between providing enough parking for everybody, not providing too many parking spaces that increase the cost and aren't being utilized. And so what we've done is we've made the bicycle parking very convenient, and they'll have e-bikes too, you can plug in for e-bikes, as well as scooter parking. So it's to encourage, and it's very downtown, of course, so there's lots of activity with 1 and 2 and 3 blocks that people don't require a car to get to.
Okay.
But it's based on actually doing the numbers and surveying the needs.
Right, so you're comfortable with the number you're providing based on how many units there is? Yes? You need to come up to the table to make a comment on that.
Sorry not to interrupt, our team is doing a great job. My name is Peter Gordon, I'm co-chair of the board of seniors housing, and just wanted to address the parking slightly, that we currently have.
You want to sit here?
Oh,
You can sit
is that how it
here.
works? Oh,
Yeah. We're gonna get,
We're a sit down group, thank you.
yeah,
We currently have 70 suites, and long-term has proven that we only have 40 vehicles in the 70 suites. A lot of people don't have a car, it's quite expensive to own one. So in addition to that, we've been in discussion with the city of Squamish and Modo we're trying to get some share car arrangements tidied up for our new development. Owning a car is about an $8,000 a year proposition. These people are very restricted income. And trust me, a share car is a great possible, solution to a lot of it. So they can go to a doctor in North Vancouver or some such thing, but normally they can walk to save on foods or shoppers and so on for their daily needs and so on. So I just kind of wanted to say that we really have put quite a bit of thought into that, and we don't think we're going to actually fill our parkade. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Perfect. Continuing on parking, just quickly, you have 10 visitor stalls underground there on the north wing, I guess. Can you get access into those last two? How tight is it to the wall there? Can you turn into that one? Do you see a lot of those being filled, or are they mostly vacant?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
We provided 10, so there could be as much as 10. We'll certainly make sure that there's good maneuvering.
Okay. That's all I have for questions. Ted, I'm good. Good. No questions.
When you say scooter stalls, is that mobility scooters? That's kind of a cool idea. I'm just, I guess I was a little concerned about the parking, but I totally understand. You've probably got some science behind how much people actually use. My only concern, I guess, would be the visitor stalls and if there's enough. So is that something as well that comes from the science of how many people typically visit? I'm hoping it's more.
Well, currently we don't have any visitor parking.
Mhm.
So people are using Pemberton or 3rd Avenue to park on.
Mhm.
So I think this is a really big increase. It's hopefully going to meet the need.
There's a long length of street, of course, in front, which has parking, in fact, parking on both sides, and it's almost never utilized currently.
I think it's going to be fair to assume that will be filled very much so in the future, unless there's some way of securing perhaps more parking from the developer that's facilitating this on the other side or something like that. But as I expected, I might be in this arrangement here in not too distant future. I would like it if somebody was able to visit me without having too much of a hassle for parking. And we seem to be shorting ourselves on other areas of downtown and whatnot. But anyway, that answers my question. I'm just hoping that was well thought out. I think I'm going to pass it along for questions for now.
So on 3rd Avenue, because as I understand, like the transit, the bus system right now, there's sort of that hub that's like by Shoppers Drug Mart there. Has there been any talk about actually bringing a loop in front of there? Just because I could see people that are older that don't have very much mobility, that could be quite a walk, and that could actually possibly eliminate more.
I'll just chime in here. The district is exploring moving the bus shelter to 3rd.
Oh,
over time.
awesome.
It's just, it's still trying to get figured by our active transportation plan, I believe, hasn't been.
Okay. And my other question was about the laundry facilities. That from the drawing here, it seems that there's sort of 2 sets per laundry room. Is that enough? It seems like a lot of units that don't have in-suite laundry using basically 4 sets of washer dryers per floor.
So yeah, I based it on our current usage in our current building. So I just basically tripled the capacity and we spread it out so that people don't have to walk too far to get to their laundry room. And one good thing is that it's not all, in a lot of these big buildings, they have the laundry room usually in one area on one floor, and we've actually made it so that there's one on each floor so people don't have to be going up and down the elevator with their laundry hampers.
Okay.
So yeah, I did look at how much laundry facilities, machines we have now based on tenants, usage, all that stuff, and I gave that to.
Okay.
One of the things, of course, is that this will be a constantly managed building, so if there have to be adjustments, the rooms are large. If they have to put in another dryer, for example, that certainly can be done.
all my questions. Eric?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just firstly, I'm not sure if I'm missing, I don't see the elevations in the package or the unit typologies either. I see some partial, like 3D renderings and some partial elevations, but not like full street elevations. Are they in here or am I?
No, we didn't put, well, you have partial ones with your material and color board. You know, we find that with elevations, they're two-dimensional. I mean, you're a smart guy, you're an architect, so you would recognize it, but they don't really give as much evidence of the building as SketchUp modeling, so we didn't put them in for that reason.
Right, and the unit typologies as well. Is there something, I can see like the letters on the drawing, but I can't see any specific information. That's it, isn't it? Yeah.
The dimensions of the rooms?
Oh no, just like trying to understand exactly what's going on. Like, I didn't pick up on the fact that laundry's not in. So laundry's not in the A units, is that right?
Correct, laundry's not in any of the units.
Any of them?
No, correct.
All right, okay. Okay, and so this is technically 4 buildings under the building code? Because we've got the parkade and we've got 3 buildings separated by firewalls?
That's right.
Yeah, okay, and then the firewalls are concrete masonry?
That's right.
Okay, and you clad them on the outside or?
Yes, where they come through the roof, they'll be flashing, of course.
Okay, and then on the front face, this is where I need the elevations. I can sort of see it on the
Yes,
rendering, but
we'll carry the hardy siding and then cover them.
yeah, because they need to project out a certain distance right on those corner units there. It's not really being picked up at the moment. So those sunken corners will actually be a bit more recessed than what they're showing. Sounds right. Yeah. Okay. And how are you doing water off the roofs? Is it downpipes and gutters?
That's right.
Okay. And the front projection roof line to the property line, 2.16 metres, so that's on the maximum allowable projection before we have to go down to bus level.
On the front property?
So it'd be the east, yeah, the front property where you're driving in there.
Yeah, it's a street, so limiting distance, of course, would be to the center line of the street.
Right. Okay, maybe I'll just put it as a question.
We absolutely will meet the building code.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It's just maybe it's more of a comment, but, and the final thing is more of a planning question. Was there a site coverage requirement for this site?
No, so the CD2 zone is essentially just a site plan of where the most density goes. So there's no setbacks, no site coverage.
This is the full zone right here.
Right.
There's 2 pieces.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
And
Yep.
illustrated drawing in the back.
Yep. Okay.
We love those kinds of zones, by the way.
Oh, and one final question. So I can see the stone to the front entryway. Is that the limit of the stone? Or is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. And it doesn't wrap around the back as you go up to a high elevation?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Is there... All right. That's probably all the questions.
Can I interject a group question we have here? That on the palette board, the colors show quite differently on different drawings that are in here, but this right here is indicating this color is this. And this one is 5A is this light color. Like they seem to be all mixed up. So is the intention, which drawing is the intention of what the colors are supposed to look like?
Your printed drawings are the intention. I apologize if we had a junior in the office put this together, they might have
Gotten
gotten
mixed
mixed
up.
up with that.
Okay, so then this
Correct.
this elevation here should be what is intended.
That's right. And you can see from the samples a more accurate indication of what the color actually is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're waiting?
Oh, yeah, I'm done. Thanks. Yeah.
Can we assume that the doors going into the vestibules are going to be automatic doors?
They will be, yes.
The access to go to the scooter stalls, you're proposing that people go down into the underground parking by the, like, third, it's at the end of the drop-off area at the front of the
Yeah,
building.
that's actually all at flat grade. There would be about a 2% slope. The entry level and the first level of parking are at grade. Because the site slopes up, the parkade goes underground as it gets further back. So you don't go down.
Is it necessary that the entrance to the scooter stalls is at this east side? Could it be closer to the elevator lobby? Or is there structural reason why it's there?
We tried to make it as close as possible to the vestibule, which is, unfortunately, that's the south. So the door is really close to that vestibule that leads you in to the main part of the amenity area.
So you go into the vestibule and go to the main elevators, the two that are side by side, as opposed to the
That's
elevator
right.
lobby that's...
Or you could go to the southern elevator, which would be the one to the, just adjacent to the garbage recycling.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a shorter distance if the entrance was down there, rather than, I mean, I guess it depends where they are in the building, okay. Are all the garden planters proposed to be the same height?
Right now they are, yeah. I know we do need to look a little bit at whether some of them want to be a little bit different for different needs, but the thing is I guess because of the demand, there's going to be such a demand that it's going to be hard to sort of preserve certain ones, but we just currently think that it's the same, especially for durability.
Yeah, it's just that given the, like the thickness of your walls with the block and the height of being about 2 feet high, it's going to be kind of tricky in a wheelchair to lean over and actually reach that garden. So it might be something to consider to have at least a few of them be wheelchair accessible.
Okay, that's good.
And then, do you have any shade, I mean, there's the gazebo just to the south, I guess, of the children's play area. But is there other, like, how big are these trees going to be for shade if people are going to be sitting and watching their kids?
Yeah, we're trying to do a bit of a balance, so kind of at the back of the courtyard, having a few bigger trees or a little bit more in the middle, and then a little bit smaller as you get closer to the patios around the edge. It's kind of this balance we're trying to do of keeping the courtyard open and light, getting enough light in there, but providing some summer shade. So we're, especially when you see the groupings around the gazebo and around the kids area, trying to make sure that, especially for the afternoon sun, that has a bit more shade. Because I know, especially for little kids, and that's where I always think of it is, you need more shade than anything. Because you get more than enough sun sometimes.
Are it looks like there's a greenhouse and a tool shed. Are those going to be wheelchair accessible?
That's the plan, yeah. Everything should be as accessible as possible, whatever you personally, keeping the slopes really flat or just trying to eliminate any kind of barriers or curbs or bumps.
Yeah, we don't see much with the unit interiors. Are you planning, I mean, you got an interior designer who's going to be working with you to have high contrast with your countertops and your cupboards and between walls and floors versus walls, so that there's, people with visual impairments are going to be able to see
That's
that.
right. Yeah, there will be a lot of attention to that because these are seniors aging in place and so it starts to lose some eyesight and mobility, other kinds of things. So we want to make sure that they can utilize them as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, the previous ones are not.
No, they're not.
Additionally, with the appliances that are going to be in these units, are you considering having, the switches are going to be on the front of the unit, so you're not reaching across, as well as like the fans, that there's actually going to be operable from a lower height. Because that's something that you should.
Something we definitely want. I've had this, the tenants have been asking that.
Yeah.
So the tricky part is, and we'll have to see, it depends on if we can actually find them made in North America or even get them. I have a hard time getting appliances right now, because they're all gonna be 24-inch appliances for like the smaller ones. So it depends on if we can actually source that out, but that's definitely on our list of to do.
Yeah. You know, and then additionally, like any of the environmental control, which should be at a lower height than they are reachable.
Right, and plugs at a higher height.
Yeah,
of course.
and you'll have backing in all of the walls in the bathrooms for
That's right.
grandfathers. What about for ceiling, can you talk about that?
For tracks and
lifts?
ceiling?
Yeah,
We have not.
yeah, it might be something that you want to consider. If you put backing in the ceiling for a ceiling track, for lifts, right, so somebody needs to. Yeah, that's all my questions for.
Just the loop that you're talking about, can you just, I'm having a difficult time. Does it go around the entire site or is it just in the back courtyard?
Well, basically, most of the accessibility is on for the public or the overall site is on one of the left or south and into the courtyard. And then in the courtyard, we've created kind of loops of a larger, and then with the central corridor, it creates it into two kind of smaller loops. So there's kind of walking loops that kind of bring you either around the whole courtyard internally, or you can do a smaller loop for half the courtyard.
Yeah, so just using this.
So like it loops along all along the top there and then back and around. So it's always a continuous loop.
Oh, walk. So you couldn't loop around the entire H?
No, because some of the grades were really challenging once you get around to, especially on this right side.
Yeah.
So we couldn't quite get the grades to work out on that side for both keeping it up to the adjacent townhome grades. And it's kind of seen as a bit more of a green space and more of a maintenance access there.
Okay. Okay. Was there any consideration about the covered drop-off to extend that further out so that, you know, like a hotel style when they can pull under, and then I'm thinking of elderly people slowly exiting their cars and being able to have that coverage instead of trying to get an umbrella.
Yeah,
Was that ever considered?
We did consider it, we didn't do that, but what it is the overhang of that canopy. So if you're the passenger side, when you come up, the passenger side is completely covered from, unless there's a blowing rain, it would be covered as they get out of the car on the passenger side.
Okay. Okay. That's all.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple now. Just on the shadowing, I'm only bringing it up because you brought it up, but on the north side, or have you given any thought to a different roof design to keep that peak down?
It's a good point. It's a fairly low slope roof now. It's 412,
Yeah.
which is, there's certain requirements for asphalt shingles. So it's about as low as possible. So the fourth floor, the edge of the building, the top of the wall will be the guiding shadowing impact.
Except for the dormers.
So the roof won't add further to the shadowing.
But you do have a few dormers in there.
Yeah, that was trying to enhance the
Yeah.
exterior appearance.
Well, I'm only thinking about it because a lot of the buildings, if you look along our waterfront here, have flat roofs, basically. You know, they have a little detail. And I'm just throwing that out there. I know that there's letters coming in complaining about that.
Yeah. One of the things, by the way, with the gable roof is because it's parallel to the sun, it's just a very small period. It's only minutes, so you're talking about the shadowing impact that the gable will have.
Okay, and then, you know, to Sarah's point, I didn't hear her ask if there's any wheelchair accessible units.
They're all adaptable
They're all adaptable?
Yes, they all are.
with a wheel and shower.
Yeah, but there is wheelchair accessible units on each floor.
Yeah.
I believe there's two or four, yeah.
So are you gonna, like, there's gonna be 4 on each floor, is that what I heard? Oh, okay.
There is, yeah, on each floor.
And then to that same thing there, the gardens, I'm looking at pictures of the gardens, and I'm a gardener, I love gardening. You've got 2 feet of garden and 2 feet of garden frame. I would rather have dirt than a 1 foot make your frames 4 inches, like build a 4-inch concrete box and give the gardener more garden space. If you look what you got there, it's like 16 inches wide, and then you've got 20 inches of garden and 16 inches.
We've been trying to source a smaller unit block so that you don't, create some really expensive garden kind of frames, but, keeping it as permanent as possible. We're going to probably have it down to at least just an 8-inch edge. So it provides a little bit of sitting as well, but it's kind of as small as possible for those commercially available block.
Well, I just know as a gardener, I'll have pots sitting all around the top because there's not enough garden space in there. Thank you.
We had Crosland, he couldn't make it today because he's sick. He has 2 questions here. We sort of talked about, did you explore any variation in roof height or roof forms? I think the answer was, you went with a 412 roof to keep the height down. You didn't want to go flat roof. That's a question. Did you explore varying heights?
We looked at it, just for the long-term maintenance of the building, having a sloped roof was considered the best option, with gables to try to provide some articulation as you go along the length of the building.
Yeah, okay. And then the package has no site or building sections. That was just a question.
You did have there were sections in one of the sheets.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions before we?
Yeah, I've got one question. What's the width of the corridors?
I think 6 feet.
Okay, the long runs, yeah, okay.
And is that similar to what's in Richmond? 6 feet?
Richmond is a high-rise, so it's a little bit different.
It's a little more?
They're a little narrower.
Narrower, I see. Okay. Is there a railing along the railings put along
We haven't
hallways
gotten
or
into
no?
that level. What we might do is just put sort of guards, protective guards along there that could be used for gripping as you go along.
Right, okay.
Often that's a good thing.
Right. Okay. I guess that's all the questions. We can do a round of comments. I'll try to jot them down and we can summarize them after the fact. But let's go with comments. I think my comments are related to parking, and look at those visitor stalls at the very end of that underground parking. Make sure you can get in and out of those. And that was it for me.
I'm good, thanks.
Overall, I really like the design. I think it's going to look great down there. And it's very Squamish too, which is a great thing to see because of so many other applications that have definitely not been lately. And with the gable ends and whatnot, it's fantastic. I like it anyway, but on that visitor parking, I just noticed that you probably, on the other side, would be able to very much, if you found yourself short of visitor parking, you could convert some of these stalls that are at the front near the bike into. And so I guess that brings up a question, is there a security gate for the residences as opposed to visitors, or is it just?
We've designed it for a security gate.
So that could be moved inside if you did want to convert there, so.
Right, yeah.
Easily solved there. Yeah, that's great. I fully support Tanis's comment about the entry being extended over the drive. That brings to mind several times when I've gone to pick up my grandpa in the winter when it's snowing, and the building he's at in Parksville is short.
Right.
Just like this. I mean, it lines up, but the snow blows in there and drifts, and it really is a difficulty. So if that can be cantilevered out a little bit, I'm sure mechanically it can. So it'd be great if it went out a couple more feet and provided some shelter that way. So that's a great idea, Tanis. That's it for my comments.
Okay, I would agree with that pickup drop-off, especially with this many people living in here. The chances of there being multiple events such as that occurring at the same time. It might be nice to just have a little bit more space for that. Overall, I think it's really successful with it does not look like low-income housing at all. Like, it doesn't stand out. I find personally the color palette a bit much. Like, I think the brick color and the green in there are very contrasty. They're not things that you would generally want to see on the same building, but that's just my opinion. I think it can still look very warm and rich with the yellows and the grays and the reds on it, and maybe consider not having the green or vice versa.
We have, by the way, 4 or 5 different color schemes that we've been battling back and forth. You know, color is always the hardest thing to vote on. But
I actually
good
like the
points.
green.
Do you like it on there with the
I
red?
like the green, yeah.
And the red on there? Yeah, and that's just personal taste.
Yeah.
And I know, I feel like though while this may not be something that any of us would necessarily be game with for another project in town, but I think that it would be something that a lot of the residents would feel very proud. It's a generationally inviting place. I would very much want to see the whole transit hub thing happening right there. I think it's a really good thing even for having students and having moms and baby strollers and just it becoming a hub where a lot of other people from the community are around there and interacting with the people that are the residents in there as well. So that's great if that's in the works. Also, having a play space in there is awesome for visiting, and the whole courtyard area seems to be very well considered and thought out for all the different uses. I would note though that I feel like if there's any possibility, the idea of there being more covered area out there, because we're inundated with rain and sometimes it's not even that cold out. It's nice to bundle up and go sit outside, but you don't want to sit outside in the rain or the snow, and just being able to get out and get some fresh air. So even possibly one of the other patio areas that already have the bricks on them, if it was partially or covered with even glassed over, so it had a structure that was like a gazebo structure that could allow in natural light if there was any budget for that at all. I would also think that it would be nice to see a different solution for those raised garden beds as well. I agree with everyone that there's a lot of space eaten up and would present accessibility issues. So even if it might not be as permanent, but even possibly looking at using cedar ties too, like having a structure that's built out of that. It's not going to have the longevity of the stone, but it also is going to cost a heck of a lot less, up front to do it, and it would look very of the area, perfectly suited for veggie gardens.
5 years, right?
Yeah, but it costs a lot less too if there was something accounted for in that. And that are all my comments. I already said the other ones. Thank you.
So my comments, the first thing is the rear garden being the west. It's a shame there's not a third access point that runs from sort of start of the site through to back. You have to go sort of getting out here like an east-west connection rather than having to go into the wings. You've got 2 primary access points from the units to get across, and I think there's access from the parkade up there as well. So that's just a comment on that. The second thing, just in the underground, just to make sure there's some sort of mechanism to ensure that people can't block the exits in the parkade there, whether it's line marking or whatever. In terms of the front entry, I feel like the 10 visitor paths combined with the other 10 out the front is going to be a fairly congested area, just because of the way that people are going to come into the site with their car, visually have to then tuck in to see if they can get a visitor space. If not, kind of reverse out, and it's just going to be a bit of a, considering the amount of units there, I think the amount of people coming and going, it's going to be a little hectic, just purely because of the low amount of car spaces. So It's also just to comment that the district needs to be comfortable with car parking that's being proposed. So, same would go, I say, with the washer dryer scenario. Seems like a lot of units for the amount that's being proposed, but if that's been already discussed and proved out in other scenarios. So. And then I guess the final thing is just really just ensuring that there's actual elevations in the future. I think there's enough 3D information in this to piece it all together, but there are some sort of unknown areas where I have to kind of guess what's going on, like on the back side of the building being the west. I don't have as great an understanding of what's happening there. But from what I can tell, the forming character, I don't mind the massing that's going on there. You've got sort of the heavy base, 3 floors in one stacked colour, and then the final top floor, and the articulation of the roofs I think works well on which should be the main entrance side. I can see how you use some flat roofs to solve the bit of a dormer problem that you have there. It's a bit of a shame that end unit being a B2 isn't covered. Looks like they only got maybe like a 2-foot overhang.
It's on each corner.
Yeah, that one there. So it's just it seems like the rest of them have suitable overhangs, and just also it's always a problem with these floor plans when you have inside corners like unit D1, I think it is. Because once that firewall projects out the necessary dimension, that balcony becomes fairly enclosed, but it's always a challenge of having a configuration of a unit with that. So, but yeah, I guess the main thing I would like to see is if there's a possibility of another connection, or is the 2 accesses to the rear garden enough based on the 230 units? Yeah. So, that's all my comments.
Okay, well, I sort of combined some of my comments with my questions earlier, so none of them are a surprise. I think you need to make sure that you've got some varying heights of your garden beds. So not just for wheelchair users, but somebody who wants to stand while they're gardening. Some more shade/weather protection in the back garden, particularly maybe on I guess the greenhouses. I'm just thinking by the children's area. With the scooter parking, it's a good idea, but then also I sort of think, for those people who can only walk a few steps, they're going to need to be parking their scooters in their unit or on their deck, potentially, right? And it seems like the hallways are quite long to get there. I think that, again, like others have said, there needs to be better weather protection across the drop-off area. I might be inclined to bring it as close to the visitor parking as possible. You might want to also consider that you may want to have one of these accessible visitor parking spots longer for rear entry van that may not be open to underground parking. So if you just made it pop a bit further into this landscape, that might accommodate that. Yeah, definitely consider your appliances in the kitchen. That's really an important thing. Looking at also having on the front of your units having outlets that are reachable and easy to access. Yeah, and just make sure that you've got extra backing, high contrast counters and floors. That's it.
I'm just gonna combine a question with a comment. The B2 on the north wing, in the rendering, it looks like the column for the deck comes down to the dry well. I'm assuming that's not the case.
I'm sorry, which suite?
The B2 on the north unit, on the north wing, just in your rendering, the column, I can't figure it out. In the rendering, it looks like it comes into the dry well, and then on this plan, it looks like it comes into the walkway. But I assume that's gonna be resolved.
Yeah, so it just takes that over.
I think it extends to the edge of the man shed, but we will definitely not have a column in the middle of the driveway.
Or a walkway.
Or walkway.
Okay, and then same comment as Dean had with those corner units with the roof. I know we have a flat roof right now there, and then it stops at the deck. I think it would, you know, everyone else has a covered patio. It would be lovely if they could be covered. I don't know how you resolve that architecturally. Yeah. But if you could get a 412 happening there, it would save you money on some workshop. The service and elevator, I think it is, or stairwell, the two gray columns at the front, I think are pretty harsh for that entry. I don't know how you would resolve that. They just, maybe in the color, tone it down a bit and then use the gray elsewhere. They really pop out when you have sort of this gentle, the lovely gables, very traditional throughout the rest of the project, but those are really kind of in your face at the main entry. But I understand as what the purpose of them. The covered drop off, again, I understand cost there, but that would be lovely. I'm not in love with your color palette. Maybe if the yellow and beige could get just a little less of that. I feel like they're kind of all blending together and it's becoming a very muted. The red is lovely, the gray is lovely, maybe more green. I'm not sure. We could fight this out all day. Yeah, I think that's it for my comments, but I think it's great. The parking, I'm in support of that, yeah. Good job.
Thank you.
And we had a couple comments from Crossan who was sick today. He suggested larger plant material for on-grade planting to reduce immediate building height. And then a note to reference the Canadian landscape standards, which is no longer the BC standards. And more variety in overall form as it relates to building heights and roofs would benefit the massing, but you've explained your theory there. I understand that. Any other comments? Oh, okay. Successful project. It's a good spot for this for sure. That site's been empty. Everyone's been wondering what's going there for years. Cool, so I guess we have 4 potential recommendations for ADP. And I'll run through them. We can have a motion for one and then we could talk about them, round table. And summarize the comments if that's our choice. And vote on it. A is ADP supports the project and does not need to see the project return for further review. B, ADP supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. We can review those. C, ADP would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to ADP to present the revised project. And D, ADP does not support the project for the following reasons. So do I have a motion for A, B, C, or D?
I'm going to motion for B.
Motion B, okay. ADP supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. So I can summarize the comments that we had and then we can...
And I wrote down all the comments you had too.
Okay.
So you can if you want to, but we certainly heard all of them.
Yeah, we kind of... How do you feel? Should we run through those again or?
I mean, it's up to you. So I feel like they got them.
You got them? Okay. All right, we're good. So, motion for B. Do we have a vote? All in favor or opposed? Okay,
Good, thank you very much, everybody.
seconded?
Comments?
Sorry, seconded? Thanks. Okay, carried, thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay, we're here to reconvene at ADP. The next on the agenda is DP 493 Waterfront Landing Phase 2 Residential at 1500 Highway 99. Here to present for the district is Susan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Stratus. I'm a planner working with the district on a number of projects, including Waterfront Landing. We're here today to look at the Phase 2 DP application for the site. And just the air photo on the screen shows the overall location of the property on the Mamprim Blind Channel across from downtown and east of Highway 99. And I've just referenced that. The zoning for this property is a CD40, which is a custom zone that was adopted for the site. The total site area is 21 hectares or 53 acres. And I'm not going to actually do much in the way of presentation from the district's point of view. I'm going to turn it over to the applicants very quickly to run through the actual project. But I did want to point out just the overall background here. There was, as part of the sub-area plan, a phasing plan was adopted in 2017, outlining the various phases. The Phase 1 development permit, let me get the mouse going, was issued in December of 2017, and a temporary use permit was also issued in September of 2017 for the sales center. And I think if you ever look down on the site from the highway, you can see those are under construction now. So the sales center is largely built, and the first block of the townhouse units, which will function as display units, are built in Phase 1. So today we are looking at Phase 2A. Of course, lost the mouse, as always happens to me, which is a larger phase than Phase 1. Phase 1 was 88 units, and the Phase 2 application is for 130 units. And what I wanted to point out before turning it over to the applicants was when the sub-area plan was adopted, a land development agreement, basically a covenant, was signed with the applicants outlining a number of other commitments. So just starting at the top there, the green area along the shoreline is a waterfront park that's being dedicated to the district. And as part of the Phase 2 DP application, they are required to do a design for that waterfront park and the shoreline area, including public consultation for that park. They're then required to construct the portion of the park that is adjacent to the Phase 2A that we're looking at today. And that needs to be completed prior to occupancy permit for Unit 200. So basically, as they wrap up Phase 2A, that park needs to be constructed. The third commitment is to design and construct the pedestrian bridge link to Victoria Street, which is an opening bridge that is going through its own design exercise and approvals with Transport Canada and district staff. So that the waterfront park, because it is a kind of complex part of the project, is going to be brought to a subsequent ADP meeting. We're not going to deal with that today. We'll bring the park and shoreline and green shores treatment just to look at that specifically, potentially next month. So today we're just concentrating on the housing units for Phase 2. And as part of the staff report mentions that the project meets the zoning bylaw. There's no variances requested, but we are looking for ADP recommendations on the overall form and character of Phase 2. And I guess the key question from the planning point of view is whether it meets the sub-area plan policy of providing distinctive character and avoiding overly repetitive or uniform building appearance. And another question I guess we're posing to the ADP for recommendations is whether the slightly more modern design aesthetic that we're seeing in Phase 2 meets the DPA guidelines in terms of fitting with the marine industrial character that is discussed in those guidelines, and whether the use of local Squamish materials is sufficiently evident. So I'll turn this over to the applicants who will walk you through their project.
So thank you, Susan, for the intro, and good to be back at the design panel again after going through Phase 1. The project team. My name is Wayne Vickers. I'm with Boza Properties. With Derek Lee with PWL, Mark Blackwood with Acoustics, and Rob Barnes with Perry and Associates, and as well as other members of the team. So. We're looking forward to hearing your feedback, and we're excited about this next phase and all the, as Susan alluded to, the master plan components that come with it. Phase 2 of 10 plus phases. The amenities with the pedestrian bridge and the park as well. I've been working with collectively with staff on proceeding with those items as well. So help kind of make the community form some of these items. So one other thing was just with Phase 1, we successfully launched that in May, and thanks in large part to the ADP award-winning design, which we thank you for, and we're looking forward to moving on to the next phase. So with that, I'll turn it over to Derek.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. How do we get this onto the first screen?
That's a good question. So let's see it. I'll tell you what, I'll just get rid of mine entirely and see if that will do the trick. Is this yours?
The estate, maybe?
No, that's mine. Let me get rid of mine. That might do the trick. Go for yours. No, that one's a PDF. And F5, I think, takes you to full screen. I'll try and use the full screen button.
Yeah, wonderful.
Sorry about that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Derek Lee with PWL. We were retained to provide our work focused on the master plan related to the park, wayfinding, kind of the overall structure of the site from a public realm perspective. And so I thought that it would be best to give you a bit of an overview about the site and kind of the overall design ethic, the structure, and so forth. So if we look at the site in and of itself, I think the one thing to point out is its context within the overall area of Squamish. It is a very strategically focused site in that it's literally on the other side of downtown, and I think that speaks to the land use mix that we have here, where we're really focused on, it is a mixed use community, but it is focused on sort of a medium density that really is over the long term going to be contributing to the vibrance and critical mass of the downtown on the other side of the Mount Climb Blind. And so with that in mind, if we go to the next slide, just zooming in, you know, the extension of Laurelwood Road across the Mount Climb Blind, combined with a pedestrian connection, which we will get into, connecting Victoria Street to the site, will be really critical to, you know, creating a really dynamic and vibrant place on the Mount Climb Blind channel. Next slide. So the site, for many of you who may or may not have been there, I think is quite a advantageous site from the perspective that it has great waterfront presence. It is a former mill site, and so therefore there's some challenges around soil sediment, site contamination, and so forth, which is certainly triggering some pretty robust improvements on the foreshore, and also throughout the various parts of the site, including phase 2. Next slide. Again, just from a contextual perspective, while this is the interface of the foreshore park, this is really going to be kind of the front yard, if you will, kind of the public domain for all phases of the development fronting onto this space. And so the potential for this to be a vibrant, publicly accessible, and ecologically sensitive area will be key. Another view, you can begin to see kind of this relationship between our site and what exists in terms of urban form across the channel, and the strong connection to the water. And so one of the things that I wanted to show you were just kind of a few slides of in process, if you will, development of the master plan vision. And what this shot begins to illustrate is how we see this connection between the development as a whole with the Mount Blanc Channel. What you see on the left is essentially what is waterfront landing, which essentially will be a mixed-use village retail, community amenity plaza space, boating facility. And we are currently doing some explorations with BOSA on what the pedestrian bridge may look like. But overall, I think we see this site as being having a variety of different development types. It'll be a nice mixed-use community, but it won't necessarily be so much to shift the gravity from the downtown. It seemed to contribute to the downtown on the other side of the channel. Again, this is just another vision of how we see that extension of Victoria Street across the channel vis-a-vis a pedestrian bridge. Still working through that. On the right, you can begin to see sort of a 4 to 6 story type of density. In the background, you can begin to see this more granular townhome density with the village landing in the foreground. And then, of course, in process, this gives you a sense of how we begin to see this medium townhouse density. This would be phase 2 on the right, kind of interfacing with our future plans for the park, which will be discussed at a later date through the next ADP.
Thank you, Derek. So I'm going to start zooming in a little bit more into phase 2. This diagram just on the right-hand side of the screen really just goes to illustrate, I think, what Susan was touching on, that the overall site is comprised of a lot of mixed-use sites, so not only townhouse sites, but also medium-rise 4 or 6-story apartment sites, and obviously a waterfront landing, kind of the more civic, more kind of village heart of the development, which would be down on the water. So phase 2 really kind of sits kind of in between the 2 red zones. At the top right is a 2 rental projects that are currently actually we're working on currently, and those will be coming on stream in kind of the development permit process shortly. That will comprise of both affordable rental housing and market rental housing, so a total of a little over 100 units that we'll see kind of on this site. So lot 2, kind of getting into that, is positioned right here, outlined in bold, and is really kind of an extension of phase 1, which is immediately to the east. Just for orientation, we have Laurelwood Road here, the Manquan Channel, and kind of the bluff towards the bottom of the screen. Just again, sort of a higher level image. We were fortunate enough to be involved with this project and the overall master planning as well. So kind of really understanding the vision for the overall community and how the various parts are going to fit together. And so early on in the process, some circulation diagrams were put in place to really start outlining a network of both roads and pedestrian trails that kind of create a permeable site, both internally and sort of connections to the waterfront park, and also down to downtown via the pedestrian bridge. So this just begins to overlay what's under construction right now, which is phase 1, and how we're kind of tying that into the proposed phase 2 development and onwards to the park and beyond.
Before you leave that side, just one thing I wanted to point out is that all of the trails that are shown through the strata parcels are covered by a right-of-way agreement for public use, so the public can move through the strata trails and parks and use them. They're not meant to be kind of hidden away from the public, and it's all permeable for public use.
The next slide here just sort of illustrates the plan's rotated 90 degrees, but really during the early days we envisioned sort of 4 main neighborhoods within the overall master plan. The first being the Woods neighborhood, the second being kind of the bluff side neighborhood that kind of nestles up the side of the bluff and forest, and then kind of the landing, which is kind of the waterfront neighborhood, which has both residential and kind of the village, more commercial and amenity uses. And I guess the third kind of contributes, I guess, to all the neighborhoods, and that's the central green, which is the park. So the Woods is really kind of envisioned as kind of a neighborhood onto its own, with sort of variations among it, but kind of building on an architectural and landscape theme. So Laurel Woods here, phase 2, what we're talking about is right here. So that's all comprised in the Woods neighborhood, kind of deriving its name really from Laurelwood. Just a quick explanation of the various neighborhoods within the overall master plan. So I kind of won't go through these in detail, but really just kind of outline the 4 major zones within the master plan, and kind of how the Woods kind of fits in with that overall context. And we'll kind of talk through sort of these points more throughout the presentation. So zooming right into the Heartwood neighborhood, phase 2. So a zoomed in look at the overall planning of the site. Because of its irregular shape, the overall plan for Heartwood has the benefit of being slightly more informal. Phase 1 to the south was more of a rectangular site that kind of derived a certain planning organization. This one here is a more irregular site, which kind of allows us to create sort of a certain informality to the planning, which I think creates a lot of interest because it allows us to create kind of a lot of varied in-between spaces. So throughout the plan, you'll see a series of outdoor spaces scattered throughout the site plan, which really provides amenity for residents, but also creates these kind of corridors or spines that allow us to circulate throughout the site to the North Park and kind of to adjacent neighborhoods. So to summarize, as Susan mentioned, the site itself is comprised of 130 3-story townhomes, and the 2 tones of buildings here kind of represent the major building types. They're at a variety of scales. Along the waterfront park, we primarily see the smaller buildings, 4 to 5 units per building, and that's really that was intentionally created to make sure that we create a lot of permeability from the neighborhood to the adjacent waterfront park. And on the next slide, we'll begin to kind of make evident kind of the circulation spines that we're envisioning through the development. So we have road, it's not named yet, it's Road A currently, and this is the main spine road that takes you from Laurelwood down to the landing and pedestrian bridge. Along the bottom of the page is Road B. So that's sort of the major vehicular routes around the site. We have 2 main entrances to the site, one off of Road B at the bottom of the page, and one off of Road A to the left here. So we can begin to see sort of the internal network of trails through these green arrows, and this particular one here lines up with the main outdoor space of phase 1. So that's sort of the central strata park. So it was important to us to make sure that there was a continuation of that and sort of a strong spine that leads us to what will be the amenity building and the village down by the waterfront. Beyond that, we also have kind of an east, more of a north-south connection, which kind of allows a bit of a transect through the site in that direction, and then also a few, access points which provide access to the North Park. So trying to really kind of take advantage of the irregular site plan to kind of celebrate, outdoor spaces and kind of pause points along the way as you circulate through the site. This blocking here, as we'll sort of see a bit later, what's really important to the architectural character is sort of a bold expression of color. And this is sort of just a quick diagram to show sort of how color is distributed throughout the site. Just a few things to note. We intentionally, positioned building colors such that no two buildings side by side are the same to ensure that there's a lot of variation kind of as you move through the plan, and we create sort of varied streetscapes both along Road B and Road A, and also from the park and internally. So we'll see a bit more of that, a bit more of the color through the renderings. As we sort of dive into architectural influences, the images on the left here begin to describe the architectural character that we began in the Phase 1 development. And, sort of as Wayne mentioned, that's the project's, proving to be quite successful, and is sort of a design aesthetic that kind of was well received. So we felt it was important, because this is all part of the Woods neighborhood, to sort of continue on that theme, but create some distinctions for Phase 2. So it's identifiably its own neighborhood, but part of a larger context. So Phase 1 was really defined by these strong gable forms, which kind of took its influence from very kind of simple, refined industrial buildings that you would find in sawmills or kind of warehouse type buildings. And those gables were framed by these kind of bold kind of gable frames, I guess that we called them, on the facade. In Phase 2, we're taking a slightly different approach. We're celebrating the gables once again, because that's sort of the strong language that's defining the Woods neighborhood. But we're taking a little bit more of a clean line, refined approach to the details in terms of clipped gable ends. We're still maintaining, so the idea of sort of punched openings in those gables, but also changing up materials. Phase 1 was very much about corrugated metal as kind of a primary siding material, and hardy siding. Both the corrugated metal provided a lot of texture to the facades. Phase 2 achieves that texture, but through board and batten siding. So we're kind of making sure that the elevations have a lot of texture and interest, but we're doing it through kind of a highly textured board and batten type siding. So overall, the character is a bit cleaner, a little bit more contemporary. So these slides here do a little bit of a compare and contrast. The smaller image on the left is sort of a little snapshot of what the buildings look like in Phase 1. Phase 2, you can see sort of have these more clipped gables, kind of bold windows kind of ganged together with hardy siding, using battens to sort of cover joints and create some texture. The gables themselves are comprised of horizontal fiber cement siding, and then the field siding, as you can see, is the vertical board and batten. Some of the other changes that we were looking at in Phase 2 is really opening up the corners, big corner windows, and expressing gables not only on the front but also on the side. So we end up with more of a cross-gabled roof form. So this particular image will also show kind of the approach where we're really contrasting gables against the field siding. So in this particular case, it's sort of a light and dark contrast where we have kind of nice, clean white and light gray gables contrasted against a darker gray backdrop. And then layered on top of that are sort of detail elements in terms of gable vents. We have cantilevered canopies over the front entries, and it's a little washed out in the view here, but you'll probably see in your package punches of color on the front doors, wood soffits in the canopies, kind of picking up at sort of the major touch points of the buildings, like the front entry gates and the front entry doors, bringing the warmth of wood and kind of that idea of sort of local materials into the palette of the building, while kind of keeping in the spirit of kind of a clean contemporary architecture. The other type of building on site, again, this is sort of a compare and contrast. You can see how we were beginning to introduce kind of a very kind of warm color palette into the mix as well. So the browns and grays, and in this particular instance, in the longer buildings, we're ensuring that the elevations are broken up by providing a contrasting color in one of the gables. So each building, it kind of has variety within it, not just from building to building. More of a front-on view, showing how these gables are contrasted against the fields, the field siding. Again, here you can get a better sense of the streetscape and how we switch from gable forms to roof soffits that are sloping more down to the street. And a little bit more of a close-up, which shows really the relationship of the units to their front yards and kind of the layers that the residents will have in terms of that transition from a sidewalk to a front gate to kind of more of a private, semi-private front yard, and then up either an at-grade stoop into the front door, or in some cases at the ends, kind of transitioning up half a level to their front door, and kind of the contemporary language that we're creating with the roof canopies. You can begin to see some of the roof soffits and sort of the punches of color that we're putting on front doors as well. A little bit of an overall streetscape. This is looking along Road A. So you can see the varying building colors, sort of the warmer color palette in the foreground. There's a color palette with a lot of blue, and then kind of a white one in the distance. And I think what it shows is sort of the variety in terms of roof form that's created through kind of that cross gable arrangement. So we end up with kind of a lot of interest in terms of bold expressions on the ends of buildings and on the fronts. And we wanted to include this slide as well in the foreground. This is phase 1, and then phase 2 is in the distance here. But just to give you a sense of driving along Road A and how phase 1 would transition to phase 2. So we're maintaining kind of a very strong streetscape as you make your way from Laurelwood down to the landing, but creating differences as well. So one neighborhood is has its a slightly different identity. This is a view looking at more of the rear of the buildings. So again, we wanted to ensure that there was enough articulation as we wrap towards the back. And the idea here is we're wrapping the board and batten siding around to the back, and then feature bays and bay bump outs and gable ends would also be contrasted with kind of punches of color in the various color palettes. On the rears as well, we're kind of protruding cantilevered canopies as well, creating a generous overhang for weather protection over rear doors. Garage doors at the ground plane, introducing glass vision panels in those, so we're not just looking at solid doors. And also there's swing doors at grade as well, providing access into those garages. So sort of creates some interest and opportunities to punch some color as well. Some of the detail elements kind of picking up on some of the industrial language that we were creating in phase 1. We've got metal guardrails and metal privacy screens, and also picking up on the wood material in the soffits the canopies.
I think it's worth noting as well, just the expansion of the balcony. We have a balcony here that's, it's the expanse of the individual unit, which is generous, and as well just the depth of the driveways that can accommodate a full length vehicle. So
Yeah.
So let's say there's a lot of space there from the site cover area as well. It's just worth noting.
This view here is more the interface between phase 2 and what would be the park, the waterfront park. And the idea here, we have sort of smaller scale buildings fronting the park, front doors of units and their front yards kind of spill out along that edge. So I think it's a real interesting opportunity to not only animate the park edge, but sort of make sure there's eyes on the park even on off hours. So I think, you know, the park doesn't become this forgotten about space at the rear of buildings. It's actually a little bit more of an urban edge, and you know, I think that'll, you know, not only animate the space, but also make sure that that park kind of is kind of always engaged and used. In terms of the public realm, the overall master plan development has this vision for sort of these common elements that will kind of thread through all phases of development at Waterfront Landing. And it really kind of draws its inspiration from, again, the industrial heritage and kind of natural materials that sort of surround us in Squamish. So, you know, from play equipment to, you know, site furnishings, really celebrating kind of natural wood materials, steel elements that are kind of handled in a, you know, a heavier, more robust way, kind of really hark back to kind of that industrial language, and kind of mixing in kind of the materials together, steel and wood, whether it be through benches or you know, bollard lighting, you know, really kind of carrying that theme throughout the site. Also drawing on kind of the, you know, the rock that's around us and kind of the large-scale boulders and sort of basalt columns, being able to use those for, you know, seating opportunities or retaining or, you know, foreshore retention. Thanks, Athene. Athene is just while we're kind of getting into more of the public realm, Athene is also going to pass around the material board for the buildings, just to give you a little more of a real sampling of the color palette. Just looking at the neighborhood open spaces, this is within phase 2. As I mentioned, because of the organic nature of the plan, there's lots of opportunities for to celebrate these in-between spaces. So there's strata park, you know, strata park areas and kind of kids play areas and areas where we can begin to manipulate the grade and create landforms through mounding. There's an area in the center of the site which we're calling the council ring, where kind of local materials, you know, granite boulders, things like that, can be used as informal seating, but also places for kids to play and sort of be adventurous and, you know, jump on them and kind of use them in kind of self-directed and kind of creative ways. So we really wanted to make sure that the site and its landscape kind of really connects to what, you know, kind of what Squamish is about. And these public spaces have a bit more of an informal language, which I think as we make our way to the public park, kind of really picks up on the character of the waterfront and sort of the more informal nature that that space will have. But as we move into the front yards of individual units, the landscape kind of tightens up, becomes a little bit more formal in terms of each individual unit's front yard, in terms of paving and hedging and fencing. So, you know, creates some definition of public versus private space, but also allows us to create a bit of contrast between kind of the more informal landscape connecting to the public park and kind of the more private spaces, which would be more formalized.
And these, the vision for the master plan, these areas aren't just designated for that individual strata. So in phase 1, in each of these phases, we're utilizing different components that that the community can use as a whole. So we've got the community garden in phase 1, for example, that phase 2 that residents can use. And we have these open spaces and permeable spaces to get to the 2 acre, the waterfront park as well. So it's continuity in the master plan, not trying to overlap uses within each individual phase, but a collective in the whole master plan.
Just a quick overview. Again, there's 130 units within the development and kind of a variety of housing sizes, anywhere from 1,200 to 1,800 square feet, a mix of 2 and 3 plus den units. So really kind of, couples to kind of family-sized units. There's kind of a range of unit plans to accommodate different families. Also within the development are 9 units that have a lock-off suite on the ground floor. So providing even some, sort of slightly more affordable options as well. And so that would be this suite here in the middle. So the upper 2 floors is a single unit, and then the ground floor unit has its own entry, kitchen, living, dining, and kind of a single bedroom. And those lock-off suites would also be, actually the next slide here will demonstrate, those lock-off suites are designed with adaptable features as well. So, washrooms, doorway widths, corridor widths, are all sort of designed to be adaptable and to sort of offer that flexibility. So I'll maybe leave it at that and open it up to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. 2 round of questions and then go to comments. I can start with questions. Is there an overall plan that shows the existing or the proposed arrangement connecting to, like, say, Northwood and the other area like Laurelwood? Looks like when you describe the neighborhoods here, I can't see how this road arrangement and building orientation fits with Northwood. Is there some connectivity there that you could, any of the plans I see just have a,
Yeah, I wonder if I can, oops.
that there doesn't,
Yeah.
okay, so how did, and those roads going to the next phase, so that's just going to carry on, or are these dead ends forever?
Are you talking about the north side?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
north
sorry,
side
these
there,
ones
yeah.
here?
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
treatment there?
Yeah, so those roads will connect with phase 3, which would be here. So eventually these would punch through and would loop in with the phase 3 development. And from memory, I believe there's an access point here as well off of Road B.
And so what are you doing in the interim of those dead end roads? I don't know how you can get into the parking stalls, or can you turn around there? Are you going to do a bit of a bulb, or what are you doing there?
So in the temporary condition, they will be dead end roads. They are at a length that kind of satisfy fire truck return requirements in terms of length of road before requiring a turnaround.
Just add to that,
Yeah.
because I just met with the fire department a couple of hours ago, and haven't had a chance to communicate this with you yet, but they are going to be looking for some kind of looping. It does meet code, but they're not happy with it, so I think they're going to suggest to you that there be a temporary loop there.
Okay.
So that's something we can work.
Okay.
Just for context, phase 3 represents 50 homes as well. So when compared, it's not another 130 homes that will be delivered here, but it is continuation in the road network.
Yeah. Okay. Trail connections. Is there going to be built trail connection between the Strata Road going towards Mount Blind Channel? You've got a corridor through that blue line there. Your cursor's on there. No, that one going towards the blind channel. From there up, yeah. Is that going to be built so you can connect to the waterfront at all? It just sort of dead ends? That's the North Park? What's the plan there?
Yeah, so we have the North Park here, and that would punch through to the trail network that would be within the park.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not building any of that frontage of that North Park as part of this?
Well, what would have to be in place is the circulation required to actually get to the units. Yeah, yeah. But the like Susan was mentioning, I think before occupancy, this park has to be completed, so it'll be kind of ready in unison.
There's also another route just to the west of those units that front onto North Park. There would be a trail that picks up the addresses on those individual units with patios and gates that come out onto the park. So
yeah,
that's similar to the previous rendering that you saw in terms of that edge condition on the east side of the park.
Okay, so you're going to be able to get out with your patio and walk around?
That's right.
Okay.
So it's typical of a townhouse to gate to sidewalk condition to create a nice public frame around the park and really define that as a public space.
Okay. And all the mail is central? Everyone meets and grabs mail from the central corridor? Is there
That's right.
First, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I see the Strata Park that connects well to Laurelwood, the first phase there. It's quite wide. That was one of the successes of Laurelwood. I thought it was a neat amenity space and play. And then it really chokes down. What was the consideration to the connection to amenity village?
Yeah, so we also felt it was important to sort of mimic the scale in terms of the width of the park as we cross over to phase 2. But at this point, I think the focus becomes a little bit split, right? I think there was a desire to both connect to the amenity village and the village and the amenity building, but also to not forget about sort of a strong connection that we wanted to create to the park as well. So we wanted to ensure that there was also a distribution of outdoor amenity area. We didn't centralize it all in one location. We wanted to be a little bit more equitable about it and provide, areas of open space, not only here, but also in the center, also at the top of the screen, and there's also a sort of a landform as well next to the amenity building down here.
Okay. That's my questions. Thanks. Did I do any questions?
Well, I was wondering about garbage trucks. What about some of these long, narrow roads for the garbage trucks?
So similar to phase 1, the garbage will be individual pickup, and in this particular plan, like in the short-term condition, as it sounds like there may be some opportunities or requirements to provide a turnaround at the ends of these two. The only dead-end roads we have now are these two shorter ones, and this one here, which is kind of really the longest. So actually, compared to phase 1, we have a lot more connectivity through the site.
Oh, that one at the bottom goes through?
This one goes through and connects to Road A. That's correct.
Well, I'm sure engineering will be up over it, I don't have to. But it seems like, you've got garbage cans on both sides, all you need is a couple cars parked in there and the guys seem to be leaving cans full.
Okay. John?
Yeah, so far the first two have asked my question, which I don't really see a solution to yet. I think we talked about it in phase 1, and that is the long dead ends. And so I guess the question right now would be, you have some parking stalls at the end of those dead ends. Do they have to be dedicated, or can they be in no parking zone so that it's a little bit of a hammerhead for a turnaround?
If I could jump in and just add
Sure.
one more suggestion that came from the engineering, our department meeting today. If you could take your mouse, the long dead end on the south side there, that one. No, running the other way. This one, this long road here.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. What they're suggesting, no, it's actually the other one, it runs parallel to the shoreline. What is being suggested by the fire department is that there's an emergency rollover curb so that, there's an opportunity for an extra entrance, not routinely used by cars, but just to get that kind of, and that would create a bit of a turnaround also as you're doing that. So I just heard this an hour ago, so I'll talk to you further about that, but that will help with some of those long dead-end road conditions.
I think if those are going through eventually, then that they will be fine, but what I'm more concerned about is the 3 dead ends, and there were some in phase 1. And I mean, I've witnessed in Elements, for example, you try and get in there and then you have to back up and there's kids in between the cars, and it is a safety concern. It's something that does need to be addressed with a standard that perhaps engineering can start to apply, but I'm not seeing that solution yet, so I'm just curious if that has been part of the discussions. And hopefully, I mean, you have to have dead ends, for it to work. So hopefully there's a standard that we can work towards.
Yeah, and I think if there's opportunities to, I think like Wayne had mentioned, one thing we created in this phase as well is every unit has a full length driveway. So although at times cars are going to be parked in them, but informally that also kind of allows for turnaround opportunities. For people who that are going down maybe some of these dead end roads, and but I think also just having these dead ends kind of naturally kind of creates this sort of these zones of traffic calming. There aren't these kind of 3 roads that all of a sudden these strata roads can be used for play, for street hockey, for those types of activities without the risk of kind of cars bombing through the roads.
Yeah, well, you'll have to go to Elements and kind of see what's going on there to understand it, yeah. Especially with trucks that we seem to have a lot of in Squamish, so. Anyway, I think that's my only question for now, so.
Firstly, can you refresh my memory of what in phase 1, the AB unit buildings, the red copper, what material is that?
That was corrugated metal.
Corrugated metal?
Yeah.
Like, was it colored or was it like left to be like cortan steel aging on its own?
No, it was like a painted finish, like a pre-painted finish. Yeah.
And that was like a copper color? Or a red copper?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Okay. The other question was the hardy siding that's on your, how much of this is going to be exposed? Like, what's the intention of lapping? Because in all honesty, on your renderings that are in here, it looks like you're talking like 2.5, 3 inches. Like, it looks like horizontal tongue and groove cedar on here. Right. Which is a very different look than standard hardy siding lap, much more traditional looking. So how have you addressed that with that material?
Right, so we're looking to do, it wouldn't be a 2.5 inch exposure. We'd be doing sort of a tighter, like a 4 inch. Okay. It wouldn't be kind of a 5 or a 6. We want to get the lines tighter to really kind of express the horizontal lines and get kind of as much texture as we can.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Do you happen to know what the distance is between building 2 and 1? For example, they seem to be the 2 closest together. Kind of like 5 meters sort of range, or?
Building 2 and 1. Yeah, we're in At the pinch point, we're probably in the neighborhood of about 15 to 16 feet.
Okay, right, yeah. And then potentially some of the, I don't know what goes on with that area, but I'm guessing there's a overhang or something like that in that area as well, so they'll project out a little bit further as well.
Yeah, at the third story though, so they'll be quite high up.
Okay, fair enough. And the other question was, I'm just wondering if you ever looked at where building 8 and 9 are, whether the road goes in between them rather than where it's currently positioned. The one being down at the park in the Mail.
Right. Yeah, well, I guess the reason of having kind of 8 and 9 together is to sort of make sure we create that pedestrian views in between the buildings.
Okay.
And if we moved the alignment of the road between 8 and 9,
Yeah.
Building 9, for example, would be surrounded by roads on 3 sides.
Gotcha.
So I think it just creates that nice relationship to a pedestrian views.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, otherwise I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Just one question. Is there an accessible parking stall in the visitor parking?
Yes, I'm sort of looking for them here because there's blurry on my printout. How many accessible stalls in total do we have?
6, and they're distributed around the site.
Yeah, so 6 in total throughout.
Do you know where they are? Maybe I'm just not seeing them.
So it's not clear on the color plan, but there's one next to the mail kiosk, there's one across the road next to the parkland. There is, I think, a couple up next to the link 4. So they're quite distributed. We tried hard to distribute them around the site.
Okay, that's all my questions.
So for buildings, like the long ones, 11, 5, 10, just the longer 10 plus units, I guess. When you look at the elevations, how many gables per those long buildings?
Let's put it all renderings on here. There we go.
So yeah, these just look like all the smaller ones. So just for the longer building ones.
Yeah, so for example, something like building 10, that one I believe has 4 gables.
Yeah.
So a 10-unit building for the smaller ones, 3 gables, and then as you can see on the screen here, this is showing building number 2 and 1, so they've got 2 gables per building.
So 10 would kind of be that, those two together. There's no elevations showing the larger ones. So 4 per big.
Yeah, however, this together would constitute about 16 units. So,
okay.
A building like building 10 would be, visually would be substantially shorter by 6 units.
Right, okay. And then for the wood material, or the brown on the corners, are you intending that to look like wood? Or just brown color?
Yeah, so the corner ones here would be a hardy siding, so painted in a tone that sort of picks up the warmth. Not trying to be wood, but just has a color that complements the grays and everything. The wood is really reserved for the soffits, areas that are protected as well. Just from a maintenance point of view, it's not something we want to kind of burden homeowners with in terms of having to kind of restain every year.
I think Okay, yeah, that's all my questions.
Okay, any other questions before we go comments? Nope, okay. Round of comments. I could start. Comment would be through the Strata Park. I think you went from a nice strong spine to sort of like a weak finger towards the amenity village. I would like to see that corridor quite wide and nice, like you have at the Strata Park on the east. Might have to lose a unit or two or something in the building 10, just some connection. It feels quite choked there. It'd be nice to see that. I guess you'll deal with that with the fire. The dead end roads there. I don't know if I like the phase 1. I like how you compared the phase 1 to phase 2, but I think there's something lost there, and I don't know what it is. They're quite tall buildings. Seen some buildings around town which is not going hardy. They're going sort of a metal paneling, which I think looks quite modern. You could explore that. Some of the end gables, for instance, on the design evolution of Unit C, there's more interest on the end wall there. You got 2 windows there. Looks a little boring or interest. Maybe add some more interest there. I do like the new window arrangement with the big blocks of window, but just seeing a little bit more interest would be nice, I think. And then make sure the trail connections work and it just doesn't dead end. I know that's part of North Park, but it'd be nice to see that connection carry through. It looks like if that was my property line, that's end, but I don't know how that connects. I have a question or a comment from Crossan, who couldn't make it today, suggesting it's very tight, dense project. However, the quality of landscape design materials should ensure its livability. So it's very tight. That's the comments I have. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I might be able to agree with that one. Other than that, I don't have really anything. I think, I like all the green space. If there was a little more, I'd like it more. But, okay.
That's it. That's all for you, Ted?
Yeah, that's it for me.
I guess I'll just repeat my comment from the first phase, which was I hope that we can create a standard with engineering for how these dead ends are treated, just to ensure that there is some kind of possibility for turnaround, because it is problematic elsewhere. I was just thinking of Seasons as well. I was just up there the other day, and they actually have 4 visitor stalls at the end of the long driveway through Seasons. But when you get down there, number one, the visitor stalls are very short, so even if there's no cars there, it's next to impossible to turn around anyway. The hammerhead has been cut off, so instead of you going like this and having a little bit more at the end to kind of turn around. And these things should be thought out, because I honestly think it's a safety issue. And then my other comment is just surrounding the clipped gables. I'm not a fan of those for 2 reasons. One is mechanical, for drip protection and rain protection against the side of the building. But also I find that it looks odd in the sense that the roof looks very light on that side. And I know it's kind of a contemporary design feature, but if you look at it, you find the shorter end, just the building doesn't resolve itself at the top like it possibly could, or I think it just would look a lot better, even with an overhang that came out a foot longer or something like that. But, it just doesn't doesn't seem to work in my mind, but I should leave it more for the architects in the room that really have a handle on this stuff. It's an aesthetic thing, I guess. Other than that, I like the colors and I like where you've gone with that way, actually. It is a good suggestion to perhaps look at a metal type siding material or something like that, other than just all hardy board. But anyway, that's my comments.
Okay, well, first off, and initially looking at this and reading it, I obviously saw this as cedar on here, and I thought it was really successful because I know with the other phase that there wasn't much of anything in terms of natural wood elements, and I think given the Squamish that even with the industrial feel, I feel like that's something that has been lacking is more some natural materials incorporated. Like there's very little in the soffits that is visible when you consider the entire masses of these multiple buildings. And I feel like the corrugated metal is a bit more successful in that. Hardy siding, I feel like it could end up not producing the results that, like I said, it's not 2-3 inch horizontal tongue and groove, and it's not metal, it's sort of something in between. And given that it's not even actual cedar or a replication of it, like the other materials that are much more durable, which we've been quite in favor of before. But I feel like with the painted color, it's going to look quite false. So that's just like an aesthetic concern that I have on that. I like that the driveways can accommodate full-size trucks. I think that's a huge problem in a lot of developments that are in Squamish already, is that that's happening. The large rear elevated deck balconies are great to see. I don't care for, in the context of this being so modern, with the design of the fence as it's illustrated on here, with the posts rising up, I feel like it would look way more contemporary and sleek if it was kept at a very horizontally inclined, without all the breaks from those posts in it. And I think I was going to further to my comment about the siding is that even in the precedents from phase 1, but especially from phase 2, is most of these all incorporate natural wood elements into some phase of it. And I feel like that does contribute to the success of them when something is very industrial, when it's in a residential setting, is having that contrast. So I would just like to see that considered. It appears, unless I'm wrong, that there's only 6 of those C4 units with the lock-off suites, which it would be nice given the 130.
There'll be 9.
Pardon?
There's 9.
There's 9. Oh, okay, I just counted 6 of them in there.
Yeah,
So
I counted
any means of maximizing those, because I feel like that's really important with mortgage helpers,
For sure.
people aging in place, rental house, like it solves so many problems when that's incorporated, and this is a great development for that to be maximized. My comment about with the hardy, if that's what is being used, even on the painted surfaces, that it's kept as tight as possible to keep it as contemporary looking as possible, so it doesn't cross over into that more traditional look. And another concern I have with the
Sorry,
white.
are you thinking of grain in the hardy as well? You know how hardy comes with a grain finish as well?
No, I think it would look better without, like I see that this one doesn't, and I think that would keep it more contemporary looking too.
Gotcha.
The white siding, so the components in here with the very minimal overhang on that. I get where you're going with the style of that, and I'm not opposed to that. I actually think it does complement phase 1, but that really light color on north-facing elevations with white is going to look horrible very quickly. Like in any place that you can see it in Squamish, it will get mildew on it. So possible consideration for any of those areas that are north facing that are not going to receive sunlight for at least the majority of the year, maybe consider a color or material change there to make them more, give them more longevity before they have to be maintained and washed and finished.
Okay.
So I remember last time we spoke about the long decks that run on the where you can park underneath, and there was concern about them being just so long. And I think this round it might have changed that, so there's a bit more articulation on some of them. I don't know if that was actually changed since last time or not. Like building 2, for example, has a bit more movement in that versus building 3, for example. So it's like the C has articulation, the A is a little more linear.
Yeah, the decks will step with the stepping of the buildings.
Yeah.
So sort of breaking up that continuous kind of facial line along the back of the building.
Right.
So there will be some stepping, so there'll be a bit of movement along the back side.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think it's C1 typology is working a little better in comparison to like A, for example, we get long lengths. So just something to keep in mind for the future phases. I think the other concern in general was just all the car parking spaces backing onto streets and the clutter that does happen in these areas, and it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out, I guess. I don't see any solutions for that. Finally, on the form and character, I think that there's been enough change to the building massing in this new one to differentiate the different neighborhoods, like having the new gables on the ends as well. The front faces are, or the long faces are similar except for the short overhangs. I'm not opposed to the short overhangs. I think it's, as long as they're kept minimal and it's almost like it's going all the way up, then it feels like it works. But if you do try to do like a 1 or 2 foot overhang, then it starts to look a little bit awkward and forced. So I feel like I don't have any major concern about that, and the material choice to me is working with the palette that's currently going on through the entire neighborhood that I'm seeing. So, thanks.
Okay, you said that there was 9 of the C4 units?
That's right.
I can only see 7 of them.
Well, it's the C4 and the C5s.
Oh, the C5
So-
as well, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only comment would be, to ensure that there is accessible parking. You said there is one. Can't quite see it if there's an access aisle adjacent to the parking so that you can get to the mail.
Yeah, so in that cluster of parking beside the mail, there's one accessible stall in that grouping as well.
Okay. And is there an access aisle adjacent to it?
There is, yes. Yeah. I think what we need to do is just create that connection to the path. I think that it's shown as green right now, so providing that accessible connection to the pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my only comments.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a good job. You've definitely found your wheels from the last project. Similar comments with that Shan had. I think that wood, not the wood, but the brown should be a wood look. I know it's, an architect wants to not use wood or try to fake it, but I think it would serve you well in this application. So like a long board or something like that. Or change the color. Maybe go more red so it doesn't read as a wood.
Right.
I think the really long buildings, I'm a little concerned that it's gonna get to be like too much almost. I don't know, the site plan's fairly resolved, so moving units to other buildings might not work, but just like 10 and 11 and 5, so it might just get a bit much with the gables. And then I would prefer to see like the gable ends to actually be like more of a parapet wall, and maybe it just has a flashing line instead of any overhang at all. I think that would really sell that look for you. I think you're flirting with it, but maybe a bit scared to pull the trigger there. But I would encourage you to do it. You have some really lovely precedent images, these two white ones, or you could, you know, pull it off for sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's good. Excited to see things getting built in there. That's it.
Okay.
I just want one more comment just to reflect on what Richard had said, is to enlarge the space between building 3 and 10, just to make it a bit more inviting to come in from the amenities space. Because right now I think it seems a bit closed and not that inviting to go through.
Question. This Gables industrial theme that's gone through phase 1 and phase 2, is that going to continue throughout the entire project, or are you keeping it to the 1, 2, and 3, and then the Bluffs is going to have like a distinctly different feel to it?
So yeah, so the one slide which kind of illustrated the neighborhoods. So kind of the Woods neighborhood is really sort of playing off of, you know, this theme. Now the future neighborhoods, the Bluff and whatnot, you know, we see, you know, the design exercise is making sure that there's a thread, that kind of an architectural thread that continues into those, but creates a, you know, a different neighborhood. And you know, what I mean by that is in the description of, say, the Bluffs neighborhood, that's where we were looking at, okay, it's right against the bluff rock face in the forest. Maybe that's where we start seeing a little bit more of the, you know, the stone or rock kind of coming out, and that becomes more of an identifier for that neighborhood. But making sure that there's some cohesion, you know, throughout the entire master plan. But yeah, enough variety that there's distinction between those major neighborhood groupings, if you will.
I don't know if I'm out of line on this, but I was just my 2 cents on that is that I feel like this gabled theme could become very, like, it could come to represent the whole development if it becomes overused.
Right.
I think taking it and, like, you know, even like you said, the Bluffs, more of a natural thing, like celebrating West Coast modern. You've got West Coast industrial, West Coast modern, but like so that there is enough variation, because it would, I hate to see it kind of all date itself in the same genre, which these phases together are going to have that same feel to them.
Yeah, and I think the site's big enough to be able to accommodate that variation. So no, I agree, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, last comments, all good? Okay. So we can vote here. We have 4 recommendations. A, the ADP supports the project and overall land use concept as presented. B, ADP supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. We're going to review those in a minute. C, ADP supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations in return to present the revised project to ADP. Or D, ADP does not support the project for the following reasons. So there's, do we have a motion for A, B, C, or D? Or discussion on those? There's some talk about how tight the space is, some of the successes have been brought here, and there was some good, I think, with wheels going, so good job on that. But is there any other discussions that are unresolved? Before we move? Okay, let's motion, please.
I'll make a motion for B.
Yeah, motion for B. ADP supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. Discussion on that? Oh, okay.
Well, the pinch point was one of those discussions.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
we
the
should
dead-ends.
list a couple anyway, so that when it gets to council,
So how's that gonna be resolved through discussion with staff? And there's a number of units here. It's really the only, how do we ensure that that's not gonna be choked, or if we lose unit B, is there gonna be a big fight? Probably, yes, so this is our chance to,
If I may, just a point of clarification, the overall site plan, I think with the, compared to phase one, which was very kind of more parallel and kind of linear in its form, this one does have a lot of movement to it. So I think the experience of moving through the site is actually going to feel quite spacious, because you have these kind of angled vistas that kind of open up in various directions. So I think the site is actually going to feel quite roomy. It's actually relatively, the spaces are quite generous actually compared to many of the townhouse sites that we've worked on. So I think, I think there is a lot of space on the site for green and kind of permeability through the site. So just want to table that.
And I want to talk about that too, because there's a lot of comments about this pinch point, and I think Mark did a really lovely job in explaining why that's happening and why the site is opening up in another direction to the north park. And I think that's quite valid. Like that's a good use of site planning. So I actually disagree with the pinch point comments. I think you are drawing people to where they need to go. The reality is there's a connection there, but it's not what's happening over here. It's not a celebration, right, to the park. It's just you're accessing this village. So
downtown.
yeah, but I think it's, his explanation is much better than my defense, but I think it's successful in what's happening as it currently is.
I agree, except I think everyone's going the other way. Everybody's heading for our new bridge when the bridge is built. I mean, I just thought pick that building up and move it 5-8 feet that way.
Yeah, is that a possibility, like even building 10, given that there's that pie at the end, that the whole building could actually be shuffled down? Because I think you're right, like even 5 or 6 feet.
So are we talking about building 3 and 10?
Yes.
Moving building 10.
Moving building 10 could kind of solve that without having to like completely go to town.
Just to widen the parking.
But I agree with what Ted's saying. I hadn't even kind of specifically drawn that. Is like you're going to that bridge. Like that's the hub to downtown.
I don't necessarily. I think if they work with planning and look at a wider scale, a larger site plan than the one I'm looking at the moment, because I don't necessarily think that everyone's purely going to the bridge. There is also that other part on the waterfront. So there's more going on there than we're seeing in this zoomed-in picture.
Because I think when you look at this, the positioning of where the amenity building, there's going to be an amenity building right here, and there's plans for an outdoor pool. There's this major pedestrian spine along Road A, which is connecting you to the village. That's kind of your main public access. So part of us was thinking, well, there's going to be a building and sort of pool in this area here. So even going through here, there's a bit of a walk around that needs to happen to actually get to the village. This is actually a stronger connection to the waterfront because it brings you in front of what would be the amenity building and kind of the boardwalk that takes you to the pedestrian bridge. So, probably our fault for not maybe having at least a concept footprint here to sort of show that relationship. But I think having a strong connection here that kind of competes with this one, they're maybe a bit too close.
Yeah,
I think spreading them out a bit is kind of nice.
And then just to add to that, that area in front of the pool is actually surface parking. So what you see there is essentially accessing the parking. So I think sort of as you mentioned before, really those points of focus of access are on both sides. That connection there is quite a minor one in the grand scheme of things.
Well, I think that if I can summarize, I think that is something that could still be supported by staff working with you to see if there's a little rejigging, but I don't think it's a make or break.
I don't think there's
sticking
rejigging,
point. No, but I'm saying whether or not it happens is not a sticking point enough to not go with B.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Well, on the connections, it would be helpful if, you know, like, there was problems at this end because nobody could see where it was going after that. I think when you bring these in, it might be better if you just at least show the road connections to the adjoining properties.
I think also the sequence of kind of moving, sort of jogging through the site should be emphasized in that wayfinding. That rather than a straight shot through the site, you reach a moment where you turn and move this way and that way, and so you're guided, you know, towards those main apertures that link into the park, right? So I think those types of things, so how we treat the ground plane, little moments, that decision points, I think, can be articulated that way.
I think as long as it doesn't feel like you're literally sneaking through a pathway that's like
right.
between two people's yards,
Exactly.
like I think
That's
it's
the point.
important it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that, but everything else you're saying makes sense, so. Okay, any other points?
We need to summarize our, before we vote here.
I mean, there was quite a few comments, I just, if you
Yeah.
want to add specific ones and some recommendations.
Okay, but we got those down. Is there any conflicting ones that you're confused about? Can you clarify? No.
No, I think
Okay,
so.
we're all clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion for B. Let's vote for B.
Let's do a second.
I'll second it.
Seconded. All right. B. Opposed? All right. There.
Good job, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, looks great.
Thanks, all right.
I know which one I want.
Ted shopping.
You're already in the seniors home. Okay.
Well, my senior place is going to be over
There is just, we'll just take a
Yeah.
quick minute break, and we've got some more business to carry on after the departure. Okay, we'll reconvene here. We've done our business. We have North thing to report from council, just had our council leave. We are talking, Sarah, you have something to say about ADP.
Thanks so much for allowing me to come and just give a really brief update. Jonas Velanishkas, our Director of Planning and Building, wanted me to come and just connect with ADP. So I'm Sarah McJanet. I think I know most of you, and Dean maybe not quite yet, but nice to see you. So I work in the planning department, and we are going to be bringing forward and proposing to make some amendments to the ADP bylaw. And you probably don't have copies. I know in your ADP binders you have a copy, and I will forward a copy of the proposed amendments. A lot of them are housekeeping, a lot of them are intended to help with the efficiency of the panel. So I'll just walk you through what those proposed changes are, and if you have any concerns, questions, just let me know. And you can also reach out to, and I'll follow up with an email, so if you have anything else that you want to bring to our attention, please do. And so our intention is to bring forward these amendments to council in mid-October. So the first piece is around purpose and scope. The original bylaw was drafted in 2013, and then with our new official community plan that was adopted this summer, there are some tweaks that we need to make. Firstly, because we have new development permit areas, and in the current ADP bylaw, there's actually an exemption for some of the technical environmental development permit areas. So it says that ADP shall comment and advise the district on development permits, with the exception of permits within development permit area 1 and 11, and those are the environmental and riparian area technical guidelines. So those development permit areas have all been adjusted, and so we're actually just removing this exemption and reference in the ADP bylaw. And then at the same time, we're doing some rewording to clarify the scope and substance of ADP review. It was kind of clunky language. Essentially, it highlights the purpose and scope for ADP review being the exterior form and character, site layout, neighborhood context, for improved community design and connectivity, accessibility of the built environment, and environmental sustainability measures. And those are all relevant to the updated development permit area guidelines that we've been connecting with panel on in the past. As an example, in the new OCP, which I'll provide the link to you because I think we provided it early, like in its development, but haven't provided additional copies of the finalized document to panel with all the development permit area guidelines, so we'll do that. But as an example, in the Universal Design Guidelines, Development Permit Area 3, we incorporated guidelines that are relevant to measures to reduce energy and water conservation, for example. So we've had those discussions in the past, but we just wanted to bring that full circle for panel. Also, in terms of ADP composition, within the district, the council and the Public Art Committee have made motion that there's interest in adding a member to design panel with expertise in public art, culture, and heritage, and/or First Nations culture. This is something that's been talked about through the OCP update process. And so there was a motion that was made, I don't have the exact date, but several months ago, about bringing forward a member to panel to integrate the arts in built environment design. And so the recommended amendment in bylaw 2628 for the ADP bylaw is to bring forward a member with that expertise. And right now, as part of the ADP bylaw, we have 4 members at large on panel. So the proposal is to reduce the sort of general member at large positions from 4 down to 3 to make space for someone with expertise in public art, culture, and heritage. The nominations for that Public Art Committee member would come from the Public Art Committee itself, and that's a committee of council. So just like ADP, the Public Art Committee that's been standing for some time gets nominated, or people apply, and our district council nominates those folks to that table. So it's a nominated position, and then that committee would nominate someone to sit with advisory design panel. So there's that piece. There's also right now in the current ADP bylaw a restriction that no more than, so it allows 2-year terms for ADP members, and further there's a restriction that sits right now that no more than 5 members be reappointed within a 12-month period. And so we're actually proposing to remove that restriction. We're a smaller community, and also we're very grateful and thankful for the design expertise that sits at this table. And so we wanted to open that up and not have that limitation that restricting reappointment. So there's that being proposed. And then finally, there's a proposal to adjust the time limit for achieving quorum. Right now it says that quorum needs to be achieved in 15 minutes. And if it's not achieved in 15 minutes after the start date of the meeting, then the meeting would stand adjourned. That we know that there are lots of people traveling from within Squamish, from outside Squamish. We actually wanted to give a little bit more generous buffer. I don't know if that's been talked about at this table before, but so we wanted to double that time, so allow quorum to be achieved between moving from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. That could cause some delay, but I mean right now it's like by the clock. So if it's like 16 minutes after the meeting's supposed start time, then like the meeting is supposed to be shut down if you don't have, or it'd be adjourned if you don't have quorum. So we wanted to be a little bit more generous. So those are the nature of the amendments that are being proposed. And if you have questions right now, I'd be happy to take them, or if you want to talk about those right now. We just wanted to make sure that you were up to speed on what was going to be presented and give an opportunity for feedback.
Does the new member representing the arts have to be at the meeting, or can go ahead?
Well, they would be a voting member, so as part of the quorum, they would, they don't have to be here, but you still would have to achieve quorum, and you still need the member that sits as like the AIBC member and so on and so forth. So, good question.
Can I just suggest that we did discuss this before, and we all together agreed that it was an unnecessary thing to suggest having someone with public art and culture experience, because we rarely ever deal with projects that would involve public art, and if there was a project that involves public art, it gets referred to the Public Art Committee, which has a purpose already. So it's kind of, it didn't seem to make any sense for what we're doing. So I'm surprised actually that it came back, because it was pretty much resolved when it was discussed, and with good reason, that it really doesn't serve a very good purpose. Certainly, if you have 4 member at large positions and whoever is being suggested or put forward could have that experience, but having it as a requirement, I think is,
as a separate.
Personally, I think it doesn't serve.
I wasn't here when that discussion had happened, but like I would kind of have to agree with that, just on the record for it, just because there's a lot of people that are in the realms of art and culture that don't have the type of, like, for the actual scope of what the design panel is reviewing, that they don't necessarily have the best qualifications for, or experience for addressing those things that we have to address with every project that comes through here. Like, if there was a way of accommodating it, that person, if there was a particular project or development that was going to incorporate public art, that person can be brought in. Like, they're almost like an adjunct member or something like that, but I have a fine arts degree, and I know that, like, there's a world of difference between somebody that knows design and someone that knows art. And they might not be the best person to be a really highly integrated functional member of the ADP.
I made my comment as a past director of the Arts Council as well, so it's actually as a person who wishes to promote the arts and make sure that we're doing a good job for that. I still think that it's not the right place to require it for ADPs.
Yeah, maybe encourage is a better word.
Yeah.
If somebody that has all of that wants to apply, like, by all means. But having to fill that position when maybe there is another 4th person that would be far better suited.
And it's nominated by the Public Art Committee, which the connection is not strong there.
Okay, well, thanks for your comments. I'll definitely take them back with me. I have not been part of the discussion around the Public Art Committee table. It was a motion that was, I think there was uptake at the council table, like at the district council table, for making that move, and certainly I think in future as development continues and there are larger portions of project budgets that might be dedicated to public art components or integration, I can definitely bring back commentary around what you've said in terms of, like, requiring a separate member or maybe some kind of opportunity to formally recognize and refer and bring in the Public Art Committee for projects that have a significant public art component. So there's other ways that we can maybe try and build that integration. So I'll definitely take your feedback and I'll see what happens with it, and we'll bring it forward to council to consider and staff, and I'll go back and find out what the nature of the resolution was at the council table.
We see a lot more playground spaces and design of that. It would be more I see more suited to a playground specialist than a public art. We see even the last two with the senior center and this one, there's a lot of public art or public spaces and play spaces. If you went one way, you'd actually ask for someone that's designed a public play space.
Expertise, which is kind of comes with the architecture, landscape architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and planning, so. Yeah, okay. Any other comments about the, like the termination quorum and that?
Quorum, I don't know, like, I don't really remember any times where we had to wait for anyone to turn up.
There was one time kind of recently that it was like 17 minutes past or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It doesn't just do it. No.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the winter when the highways are gnarly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it really has a huge impact. It just gives a little bit more leeway. And typically now, it's so helpful that we have technology and people are like, I'm stuck on the highway, I'm not coming, or I'll be there in 5 minutes. So please hang on for 5 minutes, and that kind of thing. So thanks for that, and yeah, we'll give you an update. And I will send out links to the amendment and our updated OCP and the guidelines, so you have those.
Could I add just one thing to 2.0, and that is, I see you have site layout and neighborhood context and whatnot. I think functionality is a word that's not used often enough in our examination of these projects. And that's practical functionality, and certainly applies a lot to what Sarah adds. But also things like how trucks move, turn around, all those sorts of things, so.
Because this came up with the first phase too.
Yeah.
That was one of the main sticking points.
And almost
of
every
the
one
first
of our
phase
phases has difficulties in it that they would benefit from commentary on functionality, because it's missed in sort of some aspect of the way.
I definitely encourage you to.
It kind of does, but functionality, site layout, yeah, I guess you could, it could be a subcategory of site layout in how it functions.
Those were just sort of generalized terms, but certainly if you look to the guidelines that we were trying to overhaul with the OCP, we did a lot of work in the universal guidelines, and I know for waterfront landing, for example, like that sub-area plan has its own set of guidelines, and then the other sort of multi-unit and commercial and industrial and the universal design guidelines that we created don't apply to some of those sub-area because we didn't want to like layer on an impossible number of guidelines, but we certainly wanted to get to better site function and accessibility and circulation and connectivity and those kinds of things. So totally hear you there.
When people are trying to live in a project, these pinches that were missed are more important than the actual, let's say, the color that was chosen for the building, right?
Yeah.
It really affects people in their lives when functionality is gone wrong somehow.
Yeah, when they get angry when they have to
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for those comments. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
We motion to close.
Motion to adjourn?
Everyone.
Nice.
Everyone.